And it's my pleasure now to be joined by author Anna Dowdall, whose latest book has a unique Cornwall connection. So, first of all, welcome to the show, Anna.
Well, thank you, Gabriel. It's very exciting for me to be able to have a conversation with you about the suspension bridge, and thanks very much for inviting me onto your show.
Well, thank you once again for being here. It is very exciting indeed, and I'm really excited to talk about the suspension bridge. But first, let's get to know you a little bit more. Who is Anna Dowdall? Talk to us a little bit about yourself.
I know I saw the question just now when you sent it to me in an email, and I thought, my goodness, that's a metaphysical question to start an interview with. So, all right. So, who am I? I grew up in Cornwall, Ontario, so I'm a small town girl who now who's done a lot of different things in her life and now writes books. That's the short answer.
All right. And let's talk a little bit about your career. Obviously, you've done many things apart from being an author, and we're going to talk a little bit about your career as an author. But what else have you done? Talk to us a little bit about your life.
Oh my goodness. So a lot of jobs, the way, authors always say, oh, I did this and I did that. And, they end up being a Jack or a Jill of all trades. And that's certainly me. I've done everything from nurse's aide to university professor to journalist to civil servant, graphic artist. That's the short list. I've lived all over Canada and the United States. I've lived in the Yukon, where I flew a small bush plane, and that's just one of the strange things I did. Well, when you live in the Yukon, you have to do things differently. But I lived in the States. I studied for my PhD in English literature. In the U.S. and lived in Toronto, Montreal, but I spent my formative years in Cornwall, and then my family moved away when I was 15.
Wow, so quite the varied genre of experiences, and
Yeah,
author, of course, has been
yeah,
added to that list as well.
that's right.
And so, talk to me a little bit about that and the inspiration, first of all, to begin writing, to become an author, and to start publishing some
Yeah.
books.
So when we were kids, we didn't have very much money, and we didn't have a TV. So I was one of those kids that was obliged to read. So as soon as the Cornwall Public Library opened in its old location on Second Street, I think near Sydney, it was an old Victorian house. So then I was on my bicycle every Saturday off to the public library to get books. So I love to read, and when you immerse yourself in books in the way that I did, then at a certain point you think it would be so much fun to write them as well. So really, there was never a time where I thought where I thought I would be anything other than an author. It just took a while for it to happen with me because life is very busy, family life, work life. You don't find that much time to work, but yeah, it's reading inspired me to write.
Well, that's wonderful. And before we talk a little bit more about the latest, which is the suspension bridge, what can you tell us about some of your other work?
So this is my fourth book. I started off writing YA, young adult, and I thought that sounds like fun because I remember how much I loved to read as a young person, as a kid, and as a young person. But I kept being told by literary agents, well, your words are big. You use a lot of vocabulary. Everybody says that about my books. They have to sit with a dictionary beside them when they read my books. I'm a little surprised by that. But then after a while, I thought, okay, well, maybe I should write for adults. So my first two books, both of which were nominated for prizes, were YA, young adult, and I set them aside because I thought at some point I'll rewrite them. Then I started writing mysteries with a kind of a mixed genre mystery. So my first two books came out with a small American publisher, and I was absolutely delighted that Wild Rose helped me get my foot in the door. And then for my third book, though, I was able to find, and it became more and more literary. I played around with the genre. I didn't just write straight ahead mysteries. I worked in other genres as well. I really focused on character development. And my third book was picked up by Guernica, which is one of the CanLit, well-known CanLit publishers. And then my fourth book was picked up by the small but mighty Radiant Press. That's a Prairie literary publisher. And so there's been a kind of an evolution from um, like maybe more straight ahead mystery to mystery with, other elements worked in. So, other genre elements. So a little bit of even like fable-like storytelling. It's going to seem a little mythic, not that realistic at some point. The bridge is, the book, the name of the book is The Suspension Bridge, and the bridge is a symbol as well as a real bridge, but also it has a power seemingly over the people that are trying to build it. So it's almost like a character. So I like to play with genre and still keep a kind of realistic story going with a character that's relatable, and then play a little bit with the edges of the storytelling, so as to make it accessible but fun. Because writers are all about, you spend how many hours sitting in front of a computer screen writing 100,000-page manuscripts. So you have to amuse yourself. So that's how I amuse myself, by playing with the genre and just seeing where it will take me.
Oh, well, that's super interesting and very fascinating. And I like learning a little bit more about the writer's process as well, and sort of the mindset going in, especially as you said, sitting at a computer screen for a long time. So
Yeah,
that's very
yeah,
interesting. And the Suspension Bridge that you've alluded to as your latest novel, it really had some unique origins as well. Obviously,
yeah,
there's the Cornwall connection, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but it,
yeah.
it really, I guess, appeared to you in a dream. So talk to me a little bit about that and the inspiration for the
That's right.
Suspension
So
Bridge.
first I'll show you the cover. I love this cover. It starts, you see the bridge and then you see, if you go around here, it faint, but it carries on at the back of the cover. Anyway, it's both a real bridge and a metaphysical bridge in a way in the story. And you'd be surprised the number of writers who, when you ask their inspiration, they say, yeah, I had this dream and it never made any sense. And so therefore, here I am, this many years later, writing about it. Because one of my fellow Radiant Press uh, writers says the very same thing. She had a series of dreams about the end of the world, and a certain time later, it turned into a book. Well, when I was a young person, I kept having these dreams of this beautiful, metaphysical, infinitely powerful bridge, and I was just a little traveler walking along it and not knowing what was on the other side. And it was all, I could never see the other side. And I'm sure, looking back on it now, I think, yeah, it was probably about, the course of an individual's life. You're going somewhere, but where are you going? You can't see the future. Probably something like that. But they seemed so powerful, and they seemed so, somehow you couldn't just break it down. Even when you explained it, there was still some meaning left over, that it just sort of was something like rattling around in my head. And when I thought to myself, it would be fun to write a mystery set in the early 60s and situated in a small city, kind of like my hometown. And the first thing I thought about was this bridge, this bridge that became the symbol of it. And I thought, I'm going to have, this is, you don't know where the idea comes from. Your mind is blank, and then you have an idea. It has appeared. But the idea appeared, I will have this character who will be this young nun who's really conflicted about her religious vocation. But I'm a fan of kind of darker humor, so I'll make her approachable in her conflicts and relatable. And there's going to be this bridge, and it's going to be kind of controlling the town, but it's not going to be that clear exactly what the relationship of the bridge to the town is, other than it seems to have exert an enormous influence. And then nobody ever appears to you and explains to you exactly what a dream means. So then you kind of make up what the dream means when you write fiction about it. I suppose that's what it comes down to. People are always trying to create meaning in their lives anyway. And there's so much that we don't understand, and you try to make it intelligible. So I thought, well, I'll write a fairy tale like mystery, or I should more perhaps say a fable like mystery, with bits of humor and, bits of supernatural, but not too much. And then somehow the meaning of the bridge will become clear. So, I think that's how we explain things nowadays, through stories. So it's a story to explain something.
Absolutely, and well, that's amazing, and it certainly sounds like an engaging read. and certainly the Cornwall connection as well for our local readers will definitely be of interest. So talk to me a little bit about that. We were talking a little bit before the interview off camera, and you
Yeah,
mentioned that living in a town like Cornwall, it has stuck with you for your entire life. Obviously, you've
yeah,
gone on, you've lived all across Canada and the U.S.,
yeah,
but that piece of Cornwall has lived with you from your time growing up here. So talk to me about that connection
yeah.
and how and why maybe Cornwall has stood out to you and stayed in your heart and in your mind.
Yeah, that's a question I could probably talk to about for the next half hour, so I won't. But it's just the way early experience, those early experiences of a person's life stay with you forever. And especially if it seems like the world, I've lived in big cities for most of my adult life, and it's the way that other world becomes a little bit precious, and you see it almost rimmed in light in retrospect. Not that I write a nostalgic or sentimental view of what, like a town like Cornwall was like growing up in, but there's something um, mysterious and resonant about it that then you kind of, it somehow defines you. Like all through my life. I was a graduate student at Princeton University. I, advised deputy ministers and ministers in government, and all the time you're sitting there doing these, supposedly important things. You're supposed to think of yourself as this small town girl, who's sitting there. And I'm from Cornwall, Ontario, and here I am doing this strange thing, and the ministers are nodding like I'm being smart or something. And so, it never really leaves you, and it's a fundamental part of your identity. So when I thought I'd write this mystery, and I thought, well, I know this world. It's a world that is often not even represented in culture anymore in Canada, which has become culture in Canada has become increasingly metropolitan. It's become very centralized in the big cities. So, but it's a world that continues to be vibrant and real, and Canadians live there. And I thought, I want to bring that back to life, and see if I can make it resonate for even, for a modern audience. Is I I forget if I mentioned this, but the book is set in the early 60s too. So it was both remote and from my personal experience, but a little bit remote in time too. So all of that was to bring all that forward and to create something that I thought was kind of modern at the same time. So there's a kind of little bit of an ironic perspective on the past, because you can't look back on the past without going, ha ha ha, how silly we were, or well, we sure don't think this way anymore. But my purpose was not to criticize the past. If anything, it was to celebrate it. And as I said, I think in the Cornwall Standard Freeholder interview, kind of a love letter in a way to Cornwall, and to really any smaller world that doesn't get a lot of attention, but that's still relevant and meaningful, and where, which continues to be part of the way we live in Canada. Never mind that, I'm here in Toronto now, because the job was here, and so I ended up here. Right. But yeah, it was sort of, you know, it just seemed like it was a meaning I needed to get on paper, an experience I needed to get on paper of a world that, looking back on it, may not have been perfect, but was certainly precious.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm sure after listening to all of this, our viewers are anxious to get a copy of the book. So the last and most important question is, how can they do so? Where is it available? How can we get our hands on a copy of The Suspension Bridge?
Well, it has excellent distribution in Canada, so you can really get it anywhere. You can walk into your favorite local independent bookstore, and they'll order it to you for you for free, and it comes in a few days. You can get it on Indigo, the Indigo Chapters Coles website. You can get it on Amazon. It's next day delivery. And you can order it directly from the publisher, Radiant Press. So if you and you can go to the public library and bug your friendly local librarian. And my daughter's a librarian, and they love nothing more than to get suggestions for books to order. And if it's a has the local connection, and it's a Canadian book, that they love those suggestions. So if you don't feel like spending $25 on the book, wait, I shouldn't have said that. But if you don't, you can certainly go and request it from your library.
Oh, Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, getting to know you, and as I said, this is really sounds like apart from just the local connection, a really engaging read. So thank you so much. Best of luck, and we look forward to maybe speaking with you in the future.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Gabriel.